Yo guys, welcome back to another video. In this video, I'll be going over the most viable magic combinations for mage, unlike a certain someone. For those who don't know, magic gives a status effect when hitting either NPCs or a player, and some status effects will multiply other magic's damage or trigger special effects. This in turn means some magic combinations will be better than others because the damage multiplier will be higher. Keep in mind this list is based on damage multipliers that each magic gives to one another. This does not mean that just because a combination isn't shown that it isn't viable. Alright, so the first combination is Glass-Ice.
So glass, ice, though your primary you want to start with is ice, and your secondary should be glass because glass gives the bleeding effect, which buffs ice by 40%, and ice also buffs glass, not as much because ice gives the freezing effect, which buffs glass by 10%. So usually you want the primary to be your damage dealer, and you want your secondary to be like the status effect that gives more damage to your damage dealer. Okay, so the next one is Glass-Magma. Glass obviously provides the bleeding effect, which buffs magma by 20%, and then magma gives the melting effect, which buffs glass by 20%. So both buff by the same amount. So in this case, the primary, it's up to you, but I would recommend magma because magma has a more raw, bigger base damage. So the multiplier would still give an overall more effect.
Alright, so the third one would be Wood Plasma. So when you hit someone with wood, it applies the bleeding effect, which increases plasma damage by 20%. And the same goes when you hit someone with plasma, it applies a scorch effect, which increases wood damage by 30%, so it's pretty good. So I would go wood primary because scorched would give more damage to wood, so scorched would be, or plasma would be your second element just because it supports wood better than wood supports plasma.
Okay, so the next one is Earth Ice. Earth provides the bleeding effect, which buffs ice by 40%, similar to glass, and then Earth also buffs Earth itself. The bleeding effect buffs Earth by 25%. And so something about Earth is that, in my opinion, Earth right now is the best element in the game. It does the most damage and has really good the rate is a bit slower, but everything else, destruction rate and size, are all really good. So it doesn't really matter what you pair Earth up with as long as it does not debuff Earth. So Earth can be your primary or second. In this case, I would suggest Ice being your primary, but Earth can also be your primary, and you can have anything else as your secondary.
Alright, so the next one is Fire-Magma. So fire applies the burning effect, which increases magma's damage by 25%. And then magma applies the melting effect, which increases fire by 25%. Same thing. So I'd go magma primary just because the base damage for magma is more, even though they both buff each other by the same percent. Just the base magma damage is a lot more than fire. Alright, so the next one is Fire-Acid. So fire obviously applies the burning effect, which increases acid damage by 25%, same thing as magma. And then acid applies the corroding effect, which buffs fire by 25%. So for this one, you could go either fire or acid first. It doesn't really matter. I'd recommend fire. Both have really good effects and good damage.
Okay, so the next one is Magma-Acid. It's very similar to Fire-Acid. Melting buffs acid by 25%, and then acid gives the corroding effect, which buffs magma by 25%. Very similar to fire and acid. You can choose whichever one you want, but I would still recommend magma because the higher base damage, and you would just get more damage output in general. Okay, so next one is Magma-Metal. Magma applies melting, which buffs metal by 20%, and metal applies bleeding, which buffs magma by 20%. However, there's something I want to say about metal. Metal is kind of similar to earth. It's like a really top tier element, and it can be applied with a bunch of stuff. For example, metal also applies the bleeding effect, and it just gives ice another 40%, but it's just not as good as the other ones like earth, because earth is just a better metal. But with certain builds, hint to a next video, metal and another element is an OP build.
Alright, so the next combination is Lightning Sand. So lightning is one of the special effects, as I said in the intro. It applies paralysis, but only if you deal 33% of the target's HP. Lightning, then sand. The effect is kind of mediocre, just clouds the user's screen so they just see less, but it does buff lightning by 25%. So you would want to go lightning primary just because sand is just there to buff your lightning by 25%. So the one after this is lightning water, go figure. Lightning paralysis, but this 33%, the way to use paralysis, you're never gonna really do 33% of someone's HP in PvP. So the way around this is hitting them with a soaked target, which water applies the soaked effect. So if you hit someone with lightning, with water and then lightning, they will get paralysis and get stunned, which makes lightning water really good. And this also buffs lightning damage when they're soaked by 25%, which just makes this a really solid combination and probably one of the better combinations out of the ones we mentioned so far.
Okay, next is Ash and Explosion. So this one's a bit special. It's actually one of my more favorite. It's one my more favorite builds on this list. So Explosion gives a chart effect, which is nothing crazy. It just creates a dark overlay on the target screen for 10 seconds. But it's really paired well with magics like Ash and Fire. So when it's paired with Ash, it gives the petrified effect. So when you are hit with the petrified effect, it buffs Explosion by 40%. So you use Explosion, you use Ash, and then they're petrified, and if you use Explosion again, you buff them by 40%. And also when you use Explosion and they're charred, it buffs Ash by 10%. So it's pretty good. Okay, so the next build is Ice Water. So water gives the soaking effect, which buffs ice by 25%, and it causes the frozen effect. So before I talk about the frozen effect, I'll talk about how ice's freezing effect. Just keep in mind, freezing and frozen are two completely different effects. So ice's freezing effect buffs water by 30% and also causes the frozen effect. And so the frozen effect is usually when you are hit with ice magic and then hit by water magic, or when you're hit by water magic and you're hit by ice magic. And there's like other combinations as well, but this is most relevant to this build. And then when you're hit by the frozen effect, you for sure want to use ice because it'll buff ice by 25%. Do not use water. If you use water when they're frozen, your water damage will be cut in half. It debuffs it by 50%. Okay, so the final build on this list is the Explosion Fire build. It's similar to Ash and Explosion. So Explosion gives the charred effect, which buffs fire by 20%, and then cause the petrified effect. And then in the petrified effect, if you use Explosion, you'll buff your Explosion by 40%. But if you use Fire, you'll buff it by 20%. And I'd for sure recommend using Explosion after being petrified. And then if you use Fire and then hit them with Explosion, it buffs the Explosion by 20%. The burning effect causes Explosion to do 20% more damage.
Alright, that is gonna be it for the video. I know we didn't cover every single build, but these are just the most relevant or most viable stat wise. At least there are other combinations like Ice Wind that work well, but stat wise the ones we mentioned are just better multiplier wise. So yeah,
there's all these for sure, like he said, are not like, they might get changed in the future or anything as well, but these are like right now the best. And these, like, you can make any pair you want, just make sure not to make any pairs that debuff each other. And like I said before, earth and metal, these two are like top two elements right now, so you can pair usually anything with them. Just make sure that it's not getting debuffed by anything.
Yeah, so that's basically it for the video. If you find this informative and useful, make sure to like and sub, share this with friends, and yeah, they can see it. Peace.
See ya. Peace.
I'm saying bye to all the lies and all the times you cried, saying that I wasn't right, yet I was right by your side. You manipulator, playing games, your friends commentators, and I don't know what you say about our private conversations, but it's